Chapter 5. In the election of 2004, Jack asked me to just give one weekend to campaign for John Kerry. I gave him a smile and told him the awful truth, which he should have already known. It's Kansas, buddy. It doesn't matter who you vote for, the Republican is going to win. We can't just sit on our hands, he said, as usual more intense than me. We've got to get out there and do something. Then you should go to Ohio or Pennsylvania, I pointed out, or maybe Florida. Do you have a week to take off from school, he demanded. No, neither do I. So cast down your bucket where you are, he said, quoting George Washington Carver to me. I would, I told him, but when I pull it up, it's going to be full of Republicans. Still, I committed to a Saturday morning knocking on doors with him in Wichita. Sometimes it was easier to say yes to Jack than it was to fight all that energy. Besides, I didn't like where the country was going either, not by a long shot. Maybe it was time to put good citizenship to a test by knocking on doors and asking for votes. It was really a job for an earnest 20-year-old, young enough to believe in the future. When you're past 50, you've seen a lot of the future, and it didn't tend to make you hopeful. My wife thought I was crazy. It's Kansas, she told me, echoing my own argument with Jack. Sure, you can find some Democrats in Wichita, but Bush is going to carry the state by 60%, and you know it. We've got a Democratic governor, I reminded her, and a woman to boot. She's an exception, said my wife. It's not just about John Kerry, I explained. It's about the guy running for senator against Brownback. She snorted and set out the side of her mouth, doing her best imitation of a gun moll. He ain't got a prayer. Want to come along, I asked. No, she said immediately. I'm going to stay home and mop the kitchen floor. At the end of the day, I will have more done than you and Jack both. Mindy's coming, I told her. She paused at this. She liked Mindy. Everybody liked Mindy. Though my wife had told me one time, nobody's that perfect. Surely Mindy killed someone and we just don't know about it. But after considering for a moment, my spousal unit shook her head. Good luck, she sighed. Maybe you won't get shot. You're such a cockeyed optimist, I told her. So at 8:30 on a Saturday morning, Jack and Mindy pulled up in their gold Camry, and off we went to tilted windmills in our home state. Before going a block, Jack exploded with, Have you seen what they've done? He must have gone to bed mad and woke up that way. Have you seen this Swift Boat Veterans for Truth business? I had. The first television ads had hit the airwaves and the chattering classes had sunk their 24/7 tongues into the dish. As so often happens, it took on a life of its own. There was a front-page article about it in that morning's paper. This is a Kenny Boy camera trick, Jack said. No, I replied, it's Karl Rove. They're joined at the hip, said Jack. 2 turds from Texas. Oh, Jack, said Mindy, disgusted. My money's on Kenny Boy, continued Jack, ignoring her. His hands are all over this. Attack your opponent where he thinks he's strongest. That's the philosophy. If you explain, you're losing. So make your opponent explain. Attack, attack, attack. If you explain, it looks like you're lying, said Mindy, from behind the wheel, giving me a smile in the rearview mirror. You look weak. She was doing the driving. Jack would get so passionate about whatever was on his mind, his driving tended to be erratic. Between the two of them, it was often Mindy who drove. They had fights about this. To my knowledge, it was one of the 2 things they argued about. But I was on her side. Jack's driving sucked. Behind the wheel, his Type A personality came out, and he speeded, tailgated, changed lanes, and was always more interested in what he was saying than in his driving. It was a relief to have Mindy behind the wheel. It's the Army who gave Kerry those medals, growled Jack. He didn't give them to himself. He doesn't know who he's fighting, I said. We're always bringing a knife to a gunfight, he said. You've got to get in the ditch with these sons of bitches. There's no bottom with these motherfuckers. No lie too goddamn low for these asshats. Jack, please, said Mindy. This was the other thing they argued about, his language. I'm sorry, babe. Can't you go any faster? You don't want to be waking people out of a Saturday morning sleep, she told him, calm as she always was. Our job is tough enough. Got a question for you, said Jack, turning around in his seat as far as his seatbelt would let him. Mindy and I were trying to come up with an answer to this last night, and it's tough. Who is the worst person in the Bush administration? And take out the top two, said Minnie. Take out Bush and Cheney. That's too easy. Are we talking inept or just easy to hate? I asked. Either, said Jack. Both, said Minnie. That leaves a lot of candidates, I remarked. You want a list? They did. After a moment's thought, I rattled off the usual suspects. I even remembered to throw in some lesser lights out of Cheney's office, guys you didn't hear much about but who did plenty of dirty work. But I couldn't decide who was worst. Too close of a horse race. There was a pause. You know who it is for me? Asked Jack. The one who gets under my skin the most? Kenny Boy Camera. He belongs on the list, I said. That man's got a $10 shit-eating grin. The first time I remember Kenny Boy was when the Supreme Court finally ended the 2000 election. By a single vote, the recount stopped and Wingnut Nation took power. Within a week, Kenny Boy uttered the first of many famous quotes. It's God's will we won. Get over it. This advice to the millions who might have had hard feelings over how it all worked out, and the claiming of the Almighty's hand in the event, was but a preview of the man who had a talent, no, an absolute gleeful yearning to stick a knife as far as he could into the guts of the opposition and twist the blade. His title was something nebulous like Special Assistant to the President or Political Consultant. His real title was never spoken aloud in public, but in private the inner circle called him the Minister of Hardball, a designation he loved. Rumor had it he kept an engraved brass plate with this inscription in a desk drawer. That such a pious man sported a title with a sexual connotation never seemed to have occurred to him. In an administration full of angry and arrogant white men, Kenny Boy Camera stood out. The disposition of their sainted figurehead Ronald Reagan was sunny, but what were spawned out of his revolution were legions of angry white men. Though they liked to think of themselves as macho, almost to a one, they were angry victims. It is an article of faith a golden age has been lost when the world was reshaped to include blacks, women, homosexuals, or tree huggers, and they were mad. Oh, boy, were they mad. By being the biggest assholes possible, they honestly felt they were doing God's work and setting the world right. Compromise is another word for date rape, was how Kenny Boy put it. We aren't about compromise. Their victimhood sprang from the two major branches of the Republican Party. From Wall Street came white boy greed. From Main Street, morality anger. Churchgoers supplied the foot soldiers and votes, but the boys with the big bucks ran the show, and whenever they needed an outraged chorus, they poked the flock with sharp sticks. Listen to Wingnut Radio any day, or Fox News any night. We make the rich richer would never win a single election. So this underlying truth is never spoken out loud. Instead, the grand old party consistently employs their real weapon, the ever-reliable heavy artillery, an unending bombardment that has been their bread and butter for 150 years. Its appeal is based on a primal emotion, one so elemental it plays a serious part in evolution, driving men and animals into group for protection. It treats any change to the status quo as a death struggle. The brilliant technique is based on one word, fear. There is always a they, and they are evil people. It started with waving the bloody shirt and went to grass will grow on Main Street in every town if, and has been refined and enlarged through the years. They were communists and socialists, though this, of course, should be understood broadly. If you favored progressive taxation, an SEC, an EPA, the right of black people to vote, or fluoride in local water, you could be called in name, if not in fact, a communist. By turns, they, the evil ones, were free thinkers, free lovers, hippies, atheists, criminals, liberals, elitists, labor unions, soft-headed judges, intellectuals, always and forever communists, until finally, in our time, it has just become those damn liberals. They were out to ruin your life, destroy your country, take all your money, tax you into poverty, outlaw religion, kill your babies, and sleep with your daughters when they weren't turning your sons into homosexuals. And this spiel works. Fear works like a charm. It was Kenny Boy Camera who brought this ageless, seething anger against the forces of they into a peak of artistry. He instructed the troops to always refer to Democrats as losers, thieves, cowards, perverts, weaklings, and disgraceful criminals. It was Kenny Boy who wanted to break the opposition into a million little pieces and build a new permanent majority. It was Kenny Boy, with his gift of expressing the exact inner id of the right wing, who said, "We want things like they were, back before there was an income tax." It was Kenny Boy who uttered a famous piece of arrogance: "We create our own reality," and with this hubris helped get us into a land war in Asia. "Oh, God," said Jack in the front seat. "What I'd love to do that smirking little shit, Kenny Boy." "Jack," said Mindy, and there seemed to be a warning in her voice that shut him up. We drove in silence for a while before Jack muttered, "These people are making me nuts. Out of my mind fucking nuts." For this reason, we were giving up a Saturday morning to fight the tide. We drove to the Democratic headquarters on Waco Street in Wichita to get brochures and to be assigned a turf to work by the lady in charge. We were given a neighborhood off South Oliver to canvass. They had a printout of undecided voters, and these were the doors we were to knock on first. We were given an opening spiel. "Hi, my name is, and I wonder if you're going to vote in the election." "Your first job is to listen," the lady told us, "and then try to talk them around to our point of view. If they volunteer they're voting Democratic, ask if they need a ride on election day. Get a telephone number and the best time of day for them to go." She thanked us. We thanked her. It may have been hopeless to pound the streets for Democrats in the state of Kansas, but we were going to try. It felt good to at least fight. The neighborhood off South Oliver was working to middle class, lined with small 2- and 3-bedroom wood frame houses with an occasional small brick ranch. This should be prime Democratic territory. But as we pulled to the curb, I counted 3 Bush Cheney signs on consecutive front lawns. "Stay away from those houses," I warned Jack. "No use in riling up the natives." He made a face, but went to the other side of the street. Mindy went with him, and I took this side of the street, consulting our printouts. We began to knock on doors. The response was mixed. Some took a brochure and got back inside as fast as they could. Another scolded me for working for that draft dodger Kerry. On the third house I got a good strong nibble, and the old man, union dues all paid up, asked for a ride to the polls. Bingo! I took down his name. So it went from Funston Street to Mount Vernon, up and down the blocks and moving 1 block east, working our way up and down the rows of houses. By mid-morning I had knocked on 40 doors and had 20 conversations, most of them short, and commitments from 5 people, 2 of whom needed a ride on election day. On each block I could see Jack and Mindy working their way down the other side of the street. Occasionally I heard their voices, their words floating through the morning air, across the lawns and pavement. Once or twice I heard Mindy laugh, which was always a beautiful sound. Her laugh was one of my favorite sounds in the world. It sounded like human joy. By noon we had worked all the way over to Woodlawn, a fair bit of boots-on-the-ground politicking. The few who thanked you almost made up for the abrupt and brutal turndowns and the massive indifference of most. Walking back to our car, we came upon a man walking his Shih Tzu. I always did think Shih Tzu was the worst name ever for a dog. "Good morning, sir," Jack sang out. "Are you going to vote in the election?" and held out a flyer which the man took. "Are you a Democrat?" "Not on your life," he said, wadding up the flyer, then dropping it to the sidewalk. "Don't be putting that filth in my hand." "Sir, if you don't get out of this neighborhood, I'll report you." "Report us for what?" demanded Jack, his jaw out in a pugnacious angle I recognized. "Jack, forget it. Let's go," said Mindy. The man with the dog took a few steps down the sidewalk, his Shih Tzu frisking about at the end of its leash. Without knowing it, Mindy mimicked the man and his dog by pulling at Jack's arm. The color in Jack's face was rising. A vein on his forehead stood out. "You must be a member of the Log Cabin Republicans," Jack shouted, "because that sure as hell is one gay dog." "What was that?" said the man. He stopped and took a step back, squaring his shoulders, glaring. He wasn't tall, but above the mandatory middle-aged male American gut, he was solid, and now he was mad. His little dog joined in, up on its hind legs, leash extended, and began to yap furiously. "Come on, Jack," said Mindy, pulling on his arm. "You out trying to meet a boyfriend walking that dog?" "Oh, God," said Mindy, "you disgust me." And she went down the sidewalk alone. The man with the little dog was staring hate. He wanted to do something, but satisfied himself by hissing, "Get out of my neighborhood," and pulled his dog down the sidewalk. "Come on," I said, and put my hand on Jack's shoulder. "Real Republicans have Dobermans," he told me. "Their wives have Shih Tzus." "In every way," I said. "Hey, Mindy, wait up!" She had opened up a lead on us. From the way she walked, you could tell she was angry, her hips twitching in such a way that spelled it out. It reminded me that from any angle, Mindy was good to look at. She beat us back to the car by half a block and was sitting behind the wheel, silent when we got there. As soon as we got in, she started the car and pulled out, grim. "Why don't we stop and get a sandwich?" suggested Jack. "We deserve some sit-down time, right? Right, babe?" He reached his hand across the front seat to touch her, but now it was her turn to shake off his touch. It was the first time I had ever really seen Mindy angry. Somehow I always thought she was beyond this simple human feeling. Deep down, we all believed that somewhere somebody was perfect and always maintained a calm and beautiful nature. Then again, she was married to Jack. We drove to an old mall a few blocks away without saying a word, the silent tension between the couple making me nervous, though it did not seem to make Jack the least bit concerned. We parked and went inside a sandwich shop that sold heroes, taking a table in the back. Mindy made a beeline for the ladies' room. As she walked the length of the room, holding herself erect, her sneakers making squeaking sounds on the linoleum, she passed two young men at a table who were probably in their 20s. Both turned to look as she went by. Because he was in the chair facing me, Jack didn't see this, but I did, and it was something I won't forget. She was at least 50 and still getting looks. At any age, she was beautiful. That was Mindy. Across from me sat Jack, and he was angry again. That was Jack. "Do you know what I read just yesterday?" he began. "Barry Goldwater, godfather of all conservatives, had a son who was military age during Vietnam." "Let me guess," I said. "He didn't go." "Not only did he not go, he did alternative service by being a page in the United States Senate. These people have been gaming the system since the get-go, and they never shut up about their virtue. Rush Limbaugh missed the draft because he had an infected hair on his butt. A single infected hair. Dick Cheney got 5 deferments. He was set to go off, and there was nothing to do but go along for the ride. "Now you saw that neighborhood," said Jack. 90% of that neighborhood should be Democratic, and yet people will vote against their own best interest. You take that man with a dog." "A Shih Tzu," I told him. "I bet he doesn't make $40,000 a year, and he's standing in line to kiss the ass of the richest people on the planet and vote their platform. I think it's a matter of style, emotion over substance. All these Republicans like to think of themselves as John Wayne, a single sock to the jaw and everything is settled. But you know what? John Wayne didn't serve a single day in uniform either." "Napoleon said he could get men to die for bits of tin and ribbon," I remarked, "which is really acting against your own best interest." "And now we go to Iraq," said Jack. "Iraq!" By now he was almost screaming, and I had to shh him. In the little cafe, heads were turning, but Jack was just getting warmed up, the tidal wave of invective about to break. "Do you know who I'm really mad at?" "Everybody?" I asked. "Yes, everybody," and his hand smacked the table. "Democrats and Republicans. It's the United States of money, nothing more. Do you know who is high up on my list of people I can't stand? Bill Clinton. Unzips his zipper with the wrong woman at the wrong time in the wrong place, and a few years later we wind up in Baghdad. That's exactly how it happened. If Bill Clinton doesn't make such a mess, Al Gore wins that election, and we aren't in Iraq right now." He again slammed the table for emphasis. Now people were staring. "It was the most expensive blowjob in the history of the world," he screamed. "You think some 18-year-old girl, some ditz, this trailer trash, I don't care if she is from Beverly Hills, and Bubba sure had a thing for big-haired women, some leftover wet dream from his Ozark teenage years. You think she's going to keep her mouth shut when it really matters? Oh, no. How can she not tell someone she's having sex with the president? But him! He gets a blowjob that changes history. The blowjob that puts George W. Bush in the White House. A tragedy. A genius-level politician, but he wanted to be a rock star. No, he just wanted to get his yes! A brilliant man, but a fool with his dick, and I will never forgive him. Because of him, we get George W. His whole impeachment thing was institutional payback for Nixon. God knows what this will cost his wife someday. There we leave his rant, for Mindy was now coming back to the table. As soon as she was seated, Jack, after just a brief pause, took her hand and said simply, "I'm sorry, babe. It's a well-known fact I can be an absolute asshole. I apologize. I shouldn't have gotten into it with that guy." He squeezed her hand and let it go, casting his eyes downward, repentant as a choir boy waiting for absolution. Mindy sighed, and I could see she still wanted to be angry, but it was not going to work. When he wanted, Jack had great powers of sincerity. His apology had already begun to work its wonders. "I wish you wouldn't play Donkey Hody so much," she told him. "You love the man on the donkey," Jack said, "because he never quits trying." "Yes," said his wife, "but is he riding a donkey or an ass?" The waitress came and we ordered lunch. We dawdled in the sandwich shop and ate too much. After a long, comfortable while, we forced ourselves to our feet and went out to knock on doors for 2 more hours. The rest of the day had no further drama. We went home exhausted but pleased with ourselves. As we knew it would, our work counted for nothing. Bush carried Kansas by a landslide. Brownback creamed the guy running for senator against him. People cited the swift boat ads, utterly false and cynically vicious, as having contributed to their decision. It was one of the most depressing elections I can remember.